Hello friends, I'm George, the nice smelling gentleman. Today's video won't be about a particular fragrance review or a fragrance list. Today's video is going to be again me talking about a certain fragrance topic. And in this video I wanted to talk about the topic of fragrance performance. I'll tell you how I measure performance, I'll give you a few examples of good and bad performing fragrances, and I'll also try to break a few fragrance performance myths. So what are your thoughts about fragrance performance, projection, and sillage? Leave your thoughts, please share your thoughts down in the comment section below this video. When it comes to choosing a fragrance, probably the main way that almost everybody out there chooses a fragrance is the way that that fragrance performs. Everybody loves a strong performing fragrance, me including. I like fragrances that when I pick them up in the morning, I spray them, that those fragrances will stay with me throughout the day without any need of reapplying, without the need of carrying a spare bottle or a decant or whatever. So and also I'm yet to meet a person who is into fragrances and who likes bad performing fragrances, weak fragrances. So performance is a huge factor when people are choosing fragrances. So let's talk about performance, how I measure performance, and I will split that topic in a few, let's call them subtopics. Now, the main way that I measure performance is the staying power of a fragrance on skin. And for me, fragrances, they sort of fall in a few different categories. There is the sort of the weakest fragrances, which I usually call them sub-average performing fragrances, and I'll give you one example of such fragrance. But the way that I measure performance, in order to qualify to call a fragrance a weak fragrance, it should last no more than, let's call it, about 5 hours. For me, a fragrance that does not reach the 6-hour mark is a weak performing fragrance. And I'll give you one example from the house of Armaf, the Armaf Odyssey Mega. Now, I had this fragrance for quite a while. The scent profile is decent. This is a clone of YSLY EDP. Scent-wise, quite close to the original fragrance, but the performance is just not there. I tried to let this bottle sit and macerate, but unfortunately the performance did not improve. This is somewhere between 5 to 6 hours, and in my opinion this is a weak performing fragrance. Now, the next category is average or slightly above average. In order to call an average performing fragrance, it should perform or stay on skin for about 6 to 7 hours, and I'll give you one example of such fragrance. And this is the Valentino Uomo. Now, this is an EDT concentration fragrance that gives me about 7 hours of performance on skin. So this for me is an average or slightly above average performing fragrance. Then the next category is good performing fragrances or great performing fragrances. In order to call a fragrance a good or great performer, it should give me at least somewhere between 8 to 10 hours of performance on skin. And again, I'll give you an example of one such fragrance, and this is Rue Broca TRM, which is actually a sub-brand of Afnan. This is a clone of Bulgari's Tiger. Scent-wise, high quality, and performance here is around about 9 to 10 hours of performance on my skin, which for me, this is a good or even great performing fragrance. And then the last category of performing fragrances is beast mode. Now, in order to call a fragrance beast mode fragrance, it should give me at least 11 and upwards hours of performance on skin. And again, I'll give you another example of that. And this is Supremacy Not Only Intense from Afnan. This is a mix between Creed Aventus and Nishane Hashivat. It's Extrait de Parfum concentration, and it's a beast mode fragrance that easily gives me over 12 hours of performance on skin. Okay, so the numbers are this, but how do I measure the performance or the staying power? Now, some fragrances, they will stay for a very, very long time on your skin, but at some point, pretty much every fragrance will become very close to the skin scent, or as people call it, skin scent. Now, at that point, I no longer measure the performance because I have fragrances that I can detect on my skin for over 24 hours after I've applied them. But I will never tell you that this fragrance, for example, Supremacy Not Only Intense is one such fragrance, and I'll never tell you that this lasts for 24 hours. In order for me to call a fragrance still performing, you know, I have to be able to sniff it before putting my nose exactly on the spot where on skin where I applied the fragrance. The other thing that I like to use, the other term, is projection in my videos. And this is the amount of time that a fragrance will actually project off your skin for at least a certain amount of distance. Let's call it somewhere around about 40-50 centimeters, or for the American users, you know, a foot or slightly above 1 foot. That's again, fragrances fall in a few different categories. Below average are fragrances that will project for this amount, at least this amount of distance, for about 1 hour or less. Sort of an average projection, or you know, somewhere between average and good projecting fragrances, will be those that project for somewhere between 1 to 1.5 hours. Let's call it average projecting fragrances. Good projecting fragrances will project for upwards of 1.5 to 2, sometimes 2+ hours on skin. And beast mode or super hard projecting fragrances will, in my opinion, that's how you know, I categorize them, will project off your skin for more than 2.5, 3, 4 hours. Now, one misconception for people out there who are not so much into fragrances is when they hear about performance and they hear a fragrance that projects for 12 hours, and they expect that this fragrance will actually project hard for 12 hours. Now, this is not the case, and I'm yet to actually run across a fragrance that will project for that amount of time. In my experience so far using fragrances for I don't know how many years, even the strongest projecting fragrances will project for no more than 3 to 4 hours. After that, the scent will actually start to get closer and closer to your skin. So don't expect, when you hear a beast mode performing fragrance that has 12 hours of performance, to actually project for 12 hours. Now, another topic or another term that I personally don't like to use is the term of sillage, or the scent trail that a fragrance leaves behind the person who wears it. Now, I don't like to measure that, because in my honest opinion, this is not measurable. I cannot imagine myself, you know, going around with a meter and trying to sort of measure the distance behind a person who wears a fragrance, you know, for what kind of distance this actually leaves a scent trail. And this can be you know, subject to so many variables, like for example, if you're outside, the wind speed or the amount of wind that you get, or maybe if you're indoors and you have a climate control on, you know, how strongly it blows. So for me, this is sort of a slightly like a bullshit type of a term, you know, the word sillage, and people who are actually trying to tell you the amount of distance that a fragrance will leave a scent trail behind the person who wears it. So guys, in today's video, I tried to quickly explain to you guys how I measure the performance of a certain fragrance. I hope that you found this video interesting. If you did, give it a like. I would greatly appreciate if you subscribe to my channel. I hope that everybody stays safe, and I'm going to see you in my next video. Bye bye.